straight from the mayor's mouth, with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
Hello everyone and welcome to Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. Now Matt, I'm going to jump straight in. There'll be no how you're going this morning and that sort of stuff because I'm hearing a very strong whisper out in the winds out there today. The fact that you're about to go and get your tap dancing shoes on and set out there to be involved in the next Dancing with the Stars.
I do say, know your weaknesses, Mark, and I have a significant weakness in dancing. I've danced twice publicly in my life.
Have you now?
Once at my wedding, I thought that seemed an appropriate thing to do.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that many people would have defined that as dancing. I held my darling newlywed wife tight and we moved around a dance floor. So,
like most blokes on a wedding night, I suggest.
That's right.
Yes.
And I have done Dancing with the Stars once before, back in 2009.
Right.
And that was actually a really good experience because they pair you up with someone who is a proper dancer, a dance instructor, and you spend months, in my case, learning how to do one dance.
Yes,
and I needed every month of those months.
Did you nail it?
Well, they made a very simple routine for me. I was very appreciative of that. And so the
Macarena with a few nutbush moves sort of thrown in amongst it or something.
Well, it was actually a ballroom dance.
Oh,
So
wow.
I ended up spinning the girl around on my shoulder and all sorts of fun
but
things.
You refer to that as being simple, is it? Little simple dance moves.
Well, it did seem fairly simple, and there were some times when they'd say, okay, let's try this. We might just try something a bit different there, which is, I think, their very nice way of saying, he can't get that one, can he? So it was actually quite a good experience. So obviously it's all about raising money. So
Absolutely.
That was in 2009, and they've asked me to do it again. I'm thinking I'm 15 years older than I was in 2009.
But you've got the experience behind you now.
Experience, that's right. I'm trading the experience for the getting older part of my body. Anyway, I think it's a good cause. It's all raising money for cancer.
Good on you.
I've been involved in a few cancer fundraisers over the years. In fact, way back in 2002, I think it was, the very first Relay for Life. I was on that committee.
Yes.
Tony Lawler was the chairperson of that committee. And so there's been lots of Relay for Life events since then. But that was a really good one to be involved with. Then we did a Guinness World Record on that one. So keep an eye out for it. It's in April next year.
All right, okay.
It's about a fundraiser. So I've got some links on my social media pages if people want to donate some money just to see me look interesting on the dance floor.
Oh, look, I tell you what, there'll be hordes of thousands now wanting to buy tickets, knowing the fact you're going to be turning up with your dancing shoes on. Well done, buddy.
Right,
now, listen, in regards to things that are happening right now, when people start to listen to this podcast, chances are you're not going to be in Australia because you're going to be on a flight, probably even have landed by this stage, in Japan. Is this correct?
Indeed, yep. So Saturday afternoon, or actually Saturday night was when I got on the flight from Sydney over to Japan.
Yes.
And this is actually quite an interesting one. There's an organisation called CLAIR, C-L-A-I-R.
Right.
And it's a Japanese government-affiliated incorporated foundation that basically reaches out to different places across the world. They've got different offices in different places around the world. And we've dealt with CLAIR a little bit in relation to our sister city that we have in Japan. So sometimes we might be talking to them with some things that we might be doing. Anyway, they reached out to me and they said, you've got great experience with a sister city in Japan. You've got great experience as a mayor.
Yep.
Could you please lead a delegation of Australia and New Zealand local government delegates for a week visit in Japan?
Yep.
And so I looked at it, and you're worried when you get random emails like this sometimes. There's so many scammers out there. You think, is this just another scam? Why would they want me to lead this delegation? Anyway, I did a bit more research on it, and it all looks legitimate, hopefully. So
there's no sort of take you down a dark alley and sort of size up your kidneys and liver and things like that?
I hope when you listen to this, I'm not sitting in a bathtub saying, where are my kidneys? I'm sure I won't be. But it sounds like one of those interesting things where you get to promote local government ideas in different areas of the world. And one of the things that I think is respected around the world is our democracy, our local government system in Australia, in New South Wales in particular, seems to be quite good. And so this will be a sharing of ideas, but probably from the Japanese perspective, we'll be going to one council in particular, a rural council, and we'll spend some time there. We'll look at their operations, and there'll be 5 of us, I think actually myself and 5 other delegates from Australia and New Zealand, who'll be looking at that. And I suppose giving them some advice around things that they can do and things that we might do here. And sure, you'll learn things as well, and you might bring some of those ideas back to Australia. So it'll be an interesting experience. I do want to point out it's not costing Dubbo ratepayers any money at all.
So this is all funded by the CLAIR group?
Not quite. So they said it didn't have everything perfect about it. They said once you land in Japan, we'll pick you up, we've got accommodation for you, we'll take you around. You've just got to get yourself there.
Okay.
And I don't think it's right for Dubbo ratepayers to pay for that.
Yep.
But more
Is
to
that
the
like
point,
an Uber ride out to where you got to get to sort of thing?
yeah, that's right. Well, we have a policy at council, and I think this is a good policy, that council will not pay for any international travel for councillors. I've been on a number of overseas trips representing Dubbo, and I've always paid for those myself. I've taken sometimes my wife or my kids along those, always pay for those myself. That gets lost to the public sometimes, but this is another one of those. So I'm actually paying for the flights from Dubbo to Sydney and Sydney to Japan myself, and then once I land in Japan,
Oh, so
then
when they
Claire,
say get there, it means literally sort of from Dubbo to
from
Japan.
Dubbo to there. That's right. Yeah.
Okay, probably an Uber's not going to do the trick for you that way.
Yeah, I'm not sure if
Probably
Uber's
struggling
opened
across
up
the water, I don't know.
international travel yet, have they? So that's, again, look, I'm okay with that. That's not the end of the world. Sure, it'd be nice if someone else paid for those flights, but in terms of representing the city, I think it's a worthwhile endeavour to do. And again, our policy says no international travel, so I'm okay with that. So when you read on various social media sites that this is costing the community money, it's costing Dubbo ratepayers zero. I'm paying for it out of my pocket, and then Claire is paying for it within Japan itself. But again, I think good experience and good chance to represent Dubbo on the international stage.
Yeah, good on you. Now, speaking of international stage, citizenship ceremony. Now, we talked about this last week and sort of raised it briefly. During the week, of course, you had the latest citizenship ceremony took place last Tuesday. 35 new citizens. It seems to be a really good number we're sort of constantly now getting, aren't we? Just in regards to this, I know you're going to go into some details in regards to what happened. Is there any of this linked to, we're talking right now about the large levels of immigration. Is this benefiting here in Dubbo? Is this sort of an example of how we're benefiting from this new influx of migrants into our country?
I absolutely think it's a fantastic thing for Dubbo, and we're learning a lot about different cultures from around the world. This particular citizenship ceremony was on Tuesday, the 28th of November, 35 new citizens. Now, we used to have the ceremonies about 3 months apart, and we used to have, I remember even back to the old Dubbo City Council days, it might have been even 3 or 4 months apart, and we might have had 15 or 20. We're regularly having 35, and we've actually brought them closer together now because they're starting to get too many. We're starting to get into the 40s, and I like to try and make them very personal and very memorable. In fact, one person there at the ceremony on Tuesday, his sister became a new citizen, and he'd become a new citizen in Sydney many years ago. And he said, I really like this ceremony better. Mine felt a bit like a factory just pumping them through. He said there were a lot more people. And it just wasn't as personal. So he was actually really impressed with it. But we want to keep it smaller to do that. We do them more often. So to give you an idea, 28th of November, we had this one. We held the last one on the 5th of September, so a bit over 2 months ago. Before that, we held 2 in July.
Wow.
Now, we held 2 because we had one in Wellington and one in Dubbo, so there were 2 ceremonies in July. So that's what I mean, July, September, November.
And the numbers have been consistently around that 35, 40, haven't they?
Absolutely right. And the next one will be on Australia Day, so that'll be January. So
that's
again,
not a big one too. So
another or less than 2 months away for that particular one. So it is nice, and I've talked about it before, that we used to have people from the UK, New Zealand, Canada, maybe a few from the US, and then the Asian subcontinent, a smattering. It's completely reversed now, although this one was a bit unusual because there were a few people from the UK, which when I looked down the list, I went, this is a bit unusual. We've got a few from the UK whereas in the past. That was the norm. But this time we had people from Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, India. Every time we had people from India, Pakistan, Iran. We had Lebanon. And again,
there's a real diversity there, isn't there?
Absolutely.
And plus in regards to, so the people who are coming here now, Matt, into Dubbo, are we talking about professional people who have come from these countries with a professional degree-based background or they a trade-based background, or what sort of type of background are we looking at?
Typically they are professionals. They do have degrees. They're not always using that degree, but Indian people, for example, it seems to be a part of their culture that you go through school, you get your degree, and then you go out to the big wide world after that. Some of them might have even been in Australia getting their degree, for example. So most of them have got degrees, but that's not all of them, that's not exclusive. But you do find there were teachers, there were nurses there were a couple of doctors. Right. So you've got a whole range of different professions. But the story, and I say to them during the ceremony, I want to talk to as many of the 35 as I possibly can and find out their story.
Yep.
You can't do that. There's not enough time after the ceremony. We put on a little afternoon tea for them, but you just can't get around to all 35 and individually have that conversation. But the few that I managed to get to, I say, what brought you to Australia and what brought you to Dubbo? And the answers are so varied. What we typically find, I mean, when I say what brought them to Dubbo, they normally say the great council you've got in Dubbo, so we tick that off. Okay. What was the second reason?
A dancing star right here.
That's right. We wanted to see the mayor dance. But typically they talk about the fact that they were looking for somewhere that wasn't a Sydney or a Melbourne. So often people come via Sydney or sometimes even via Melbourne. So they probably have come from some of these places like India, highly populated country. Getting to somewhere like Sydney probably feels a bit the same. So they're trying to look for something a bit different. And so
do
often,
they have family out here? A lot of the guys as well come out here?
it varies.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll be the first one and then, oh, by the way, my brother, my uncle, my sister, whatever is now coming, or my relative was already out here and I wanted to come.
Yeah.
But it does come down to jobs.
Yeah.
They'll be in Sydney or they'll be somewhere, even they'll be overseas, and they'll look and they'll see jobs advertised in Dubbo. And sometimes that's the driver, but they all talk about the fact then they'll do a bit of research. They're not going to move to somewhere where they go, it's terrible. And sometimes some of them will move to Dubbo because I've got to serve a little bit of time on my regional visa time frame to be able to get my permanent residency or to tick off my requirements for my visa. But, I got out here and it's fantastic. And organisations like Oroscon do a really good job where they do try and make the community very welcoming. And what I really like about it is I've learnt about a whole range of different cultural activities from around the world by having different groups here. So Diwali, for example, Diwali is huge in India. A couple of weeks ago, Diwali was celebrated here in Dubbo by nowhere near the same magnitude, but by certainly a number of people from
So what's
India.
Diwali? What's that?
You could almost describe it, and I'm probably going to offend some people here, but you could almost describe it as the Indian version of Christmas.
Oh, okay,
it's a
right.
time
Yep.
where you get together with family, you have some holidays, you do some gift giving. One thing that's curious in India is it's a time to paint your house.
Oh.
So even your business. So there is...
What, literally, just that every year they paint the house in different colour or something?
They'll paint a different part of it typically. But one of the things that's fascinating is if you go down various markets, places where you'll see trinkets sold, like a typical market sort of event in various cities in India, for the few weeks leading up to Diwali, there'll be suddenly these pop-up businesses of paint and there'll be a plethora of different paints of different colours, and they do, I'm sure, 6 months worth of trade in a few weeks.
Yes, that's right.
Because people have to buy their paint because it's Diwali. You've got to go and repaint
It's all part
some
of the
section.
tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And so that's part of it. But yeah, again, and I'm happy for people to tell me that I'm completely wrong here, but my impression of Diwali is the Indian version of Christmas. So what we do at Christmas, we have feasts, we get together with family, we give presents, all those things. We don't do painting, but well, sometimes you do.
Some people do.
If you've got your family coming home, we better
Who knows?
get the
Who
house
knows? That's
looking
right.
nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it seems like that sort of event. But again, here in Dubbo, there was a group of Indian people who were celebrating Diwali, talking about Diwali and doing things that were related to that.
So tell me, in regards to one of the issues, I suppose, surrounding the current debate and discussion about the high levels of migration is in regards to housing. How are we going in regards to housing our new influx of migrants here into our community? Is it an issue?
It is an issue, definitely. There's no doubt about it. It's still one of the things we're working on. As you know, we've released blocks of land in Keswick. There are other builders that are promoting or progressing their various building works as quick as they possibly can because there is that demand there. And it's an interesting one because the demand is absolutely there. Interest rate rises and cost of living pressures and inflation have made it a bit harder for some of those people to get into those houses. Rental, that's gone up. Obviously, we've got very low rental vacancy rates. So you've got a few things conspiring against us. With all of that, there are people still
wanting to come here.
Definitely wanting to come here. Yeah. So it's an ongoing issue. It's something we have regular discussions with the government about, something that we're regularly working on ourselves. I don't know that anyone's got the magic solution, the silver bullet, but we're working on that. But look, I do love citizenship ceremonies
they're wonderful.
and welcome all those people to Dubbo. And they've already been here in Dubbo for a time, but that's one thing that they always tell me. Every ceremony I do, people say, it's so welcoming here in Dubbo. And even if I was only planning on coming here for 5 minutes or for 5 years or forever, I've just been welcomed and made to feel like this is now home, which is
that's
fantastic.
lovely to hear. Now, driving around town, for all those observant little bodies out there, you may well have noticed the fact that there's been the new installation of the Rhinos. When I say the new installation, there's been a bit of an update. It's all about painting and things like this. All of the artworks that the kids won the prizes for the Rhinos, it looks as though they've all been installed and updated. Is this correct?
Yeah, so you've got 3 new design Rhinos at the moment. Now, you may remember many months ago, Councillor Matt Wright, who's the chairman of Spark, and myself and some of our staff did the judging. Actually, Erin Williamson from the Dubbo Business Chamber as well.
Yep.
We did the judging for the design. So lots of designs were submitted by the various schools around Dubbo, and we had to judge those, which was a tough job because there were some great designs in there. Some of them were conceptual. The artwork mightn't have been perfect that they submitted, but their concept was great. Another one spent a huge amount of time on the artwork, so it was a really tough job. So we picked out the winners of that, and then the exciting part was they then got their design to be put on a Rhino. So
now professional painters did the job?
Correct. So we then had professional artists who come along, and they had to modify the designs a little bit sometimes because the kids did a 2D drawing and that was being translated to a 3D image. So they had to basically join the dots a little bit. But when you looked at the design, and I looked at one of them, I went out for the launch for one of them and looked at the design they drew and then what was on there, and it looked pretty good. It looked representative of what they had.
So where can you see them? Where are the 3?
Well, I'll mention the names first of the 3.
The kids, absolutely.
Yeah, so Madison Roach from Dubbo Senior Campus, her design is now out there. Montana McNair from Dubbo Christian School. And Alana Haque, I think it's pronounced, is that right, from St John's College? Hoaque, so Haque or Hake.
Yes.
Yeah, so those were the 3. Laura Holland was the artist that was chosen. So she was
St John's student herself.
Yeah, there you go. So she was chosen to actually translate those to the actual concepts. So where you'll find them is you've got the Newell Highway. So on the Newell Highway, the south side of the Newell Highway, coming in from Parks, there's a rest stop there.
Yes.
Now that's a really good one because that Rhino is installed in an area that's off the road in an area that's a rest area. So you can safely get to that, and that's where we went for the launch of the designs because it was safe for us to have students.
Is that just out of town a little bit?
It is, past Obley Road turn off to the zoo.
Yes.
You keep going a little bit past that, it's on the right-hand side after that.
One.
Yeah, so that's one there. There's also the one on the Narromine Road, and there's the one on the Mitchell Highway coming in from Wellington. Now,
very prominent positions.
Yeah, they are. And we do say to people, you're not meant to stop beside them. They're on highways. You're not meant to stop beside them and have photos taken. You're meant to just look at them and admire them as you go past. But I do see people stopping, and it's not technically legal. You're stopping beside a highway, but I still think it's great that people love the idea.
They love the idea of the Rhino, the photo.
And stopping to have a photo.
Yes.
So it is something that's quite nice. And I just like the idea. I mean, this is this whole Rhino trail that started back in 2014. We had rhinos going out from Orange, Bathurst through all the way to Sydney kind of thing to lead people to Dubbo as such. And those designs have been in place for some time. Again, time to update them, time to change them. We change them from time to time. We've changed the one up at Apex Oval depending on events that might be on. So it's a good little way of having something that's consistent but also a bit of variety. And I remember a long time ago, my brother has been in Boston in the US of A for decades. And so we've been to visit him a few times. And I remember one time going through Boston and they had cows. And there would have been at least 50 cows, maybe more.
Made you feel like you're back in India again.
Well, yeah, these ones weren't moving though. These ones were still, there were plastic cows, life size, and they were painted with a whole range of designs. And I thought it was fantastic and fascinating. And I remember coming back to Dubbo, that's pretty cool. I think it'd be great if we could do something like that, but I didn't actually do anything with it. It was just a bit of a thought bubble. And then it was several years later that the design of the idea came up with Taronga Western Plains Zoo and the Taronga Zoo in Sydney to do the rhinos. And I went, that's just like those cows over in Boston. I don't know where they got the idea from, but it was a popular tourist attraction. I know people were going around the cow trail in Boston, and I know people do go around here and try and get photos with all those rhinos. So keep an eye out for those 3 designs.
Well, we don't have the big potatoes and we don't have the big prawns, but we've got lots and lots of little rhinos.
We've got a crash of rhinos.
A crash of rhinos?
Crash of rhinos. Apparently that's what a group is called in rhinos, a crash of rhinos. It's a good one for a trivia contest.
It is, that's right. I'll put that into my memory banks.
That's right. But one of the... Oh, look, congratulations to those 3 artists for a start, but I think there'll be things we'll do with those rhinos in years to come, and just keep an eye out for those different designs. But yeah, congratulations to those kids, and well done to Laura for interpreting those.
Absolutely, and get out and have a look at them. And during the week, Matt, you had the pleasure, I'm sure, of going out to the Royal Flying Doctor Service out there for a presentation where they gave a year in review. Now, this is a magic organisation. They do a terrific amount of stuff for the community, don't they? And of course, across New South Wales and Australia, really. So, the year in review, are you able to enlighten us with a little bit of what the year was like?
Absolutely, and this is just our section. The southeastern section is, I'm sure, what this area is called around here. And there are lots of organisations. My Rotary Club, South Dubbo Rotary Club, has done lots of fundraising. Millions of dollars have been contributed via that. They've got a very active fundraising group. What they do is quite unbelievable, and they've got that visitor experience center out there now.
Yes, it's magic.
I think from memory they did initially say they were expecting to get about 40,000 visitors a year through that, but in the year review, it had combined numbers between Dubbo and Broken Hill. They talked about 60,000. So
Right.
I think it'd probably be right that they get about 40,000 a year through that. And
It's great numbers.
It is. People that see that and look at that, talk to me about it, and they just go, wow, that video they had, because they've got some videos about some real life examples where people have been injured and they've come in to rescue them as such. And you hear these real life stories and you know that people would be dead if we didn't have the Royal Flying Doctor Service.
Absolutely.
But they do a lot of proactive stuff as well. But I grabbed some of the numbers, which I thought were quite fascinating. 68,000 occasions of service. Now, that's not 68,000 emergencies because they do lots of proactive things. They do dental clinics, for example. They do things where they're trying to help health in regional areas, but obviously some of those are emergency situations.
68,000?
68,000, what they call occasions of service.
Right.
They've got 15 aircraft over the last year. They've flown 3 million kilometres.
And this is just the region out
This
here.
is southeastern section.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
4,609 inter-hospital transfers. So keeping in mind that they do have some contracts with the government to transfer people. So it's not just those emergency retrievals.
Yep.
Sometimes it is, we've got Billy, he needs to get down to a hospital and they need to transfer them via air because it's obviously an urgent
You're looking at
situation.
nearly 100 a week. It's incredible.
You're looking at a lot, aren't you?
Wow.
They've had 91 emergency retrievals. So those things that the Royal Flying Doctor Service is known for, 91. So again, you look at that and that's only a small part of it. But gee, when you go out west, and I know I've been on fundraising events where we've gone out into western areas. When you say you're fundraising for the Royal Flying Doctor Service, people have got their hand in their pocket before you know it because they know that one day they might be on the side of the road or out in the paddock and their only hope is that the Royal Flying Doctor Service lands somewhere nearby.
Yeah.
And you've got 348 staff employed and you've got the service has been going now for 95 years.
Goodness me.
So quite incredible. So that was the year in review from the RFDS. And again, it was a pretty big audience there. I would have estimated at least 50, maybe 60 people in the audience just to hear about what's happened for the year. Again, it does capture the imagination. Anyone that I know that works for them, anyone that's on their board, when they talk about different employments or employers they've had over the years or different boards they might be on, when they say the RFDS, everyone, tell me more about that. It does capture the imagination of people. And I think people are just fascinated by the whole concept of it. So, yeah, it's worthwhile going and seeing. If you haven't seen that, worthwhile going and seeing it or going and seeing it again.
Yeah, well done to all involved out there. I had a couple of walks this week, Matt, down by the river. It's been nice, actually. I've been back this week from Sydney and had the opportunity to walk around our beautiful Track O'Reilly track down there and through the river system and notice the fact that there's a bit of concreting going in there. It's in a little spot there down there where I suppose it's very close anyway to where the parkrun begins. Talk us through this. Are we extending where the concreting was put in there where the bend got started to wash away and we put some concreting there in the pathway? Are we doing the whole area of that track with concrete or is just this little section getting done?
This is a 510 metre section.
Right.
Now, I want to just put some cold water and some rumours for a start. I've heard one rumour that I've demanded that we extend this concrete pathway because my parkrun times will be better.
Well, it's a fair rumour.
Yeah, and it's correct. I actually,
yes.
When we did put in the last bit of concrete section, then my parkrun times did improve.
It did.
So
that's the facts.
it seems like a reasonable thing, doesn't it, for me to do, to say, look, my parkrun times, I want to take a few seconds off them so I could train or I could eat better or I could just get council to spend some money on extending the concrete path. That's the option I'll go for.
Well, it's interesting. I never realised you would have such power. But anyway.
That's right, exactly. So that's rumour number one, which I found interesting.
Excellent.
Rumour number two is that for me to get my, inverted commas, e-scooters out there on the community or on Trackarati, then the New South Wales government has told us that we need to have concrete all the way around Trackarati, so I need to get that all extended to concrete before we can finally put e-scooters on there.
That's a rather interesting one because, as far as I'm aware, New South Wales government, last time I spoke to them, are still up in the air in regards to the whole nature of e-scooters anyway, so I don't know how they wanted to be demanding anything in regards to this space.
Yeah, they're still working on some different concepts
absolutely.
and they're doing some trials around it, but the Trackarati would be fine as crushed granite or concrete.
Pretty sure,
or
yeah, I think you could do an e-scooter on that anyway. So,
Exactly
okay, right, that's the second one.
The
Any more?
third one that I heard was that this is me looking after my mates and giving work to some of my concrete mates.
Oh, have you?
Now, most people don't realise that
You've got a wide diversity of mates.
I do.
Really
I don't have any concrete
You look after
mates
them
per
well from
se.
the sound of things.
That's right. So the contract has actually gone to a company called Semler Building Projects.
Close mate of yours?
Well, I don't actually know who owns Semler Building Projects. I imagine it's someone with a surname of Semler.
Yes, that makes
and
sense.
I do apologise if I do know someone in that organisation, but I don't actually know who's in that. So I don't know that I've got any linkages there whatsoever to be able to direct some of those funds to there. And if I was going to do that, wouldn't I just take some money out of the till and hand it over to them? Why bother about going
That'd be
through
the
this
easier
process?
option anyway, wouldn't it, I
It would
think?
be. The reality as to why we're doing it is the same reason we did the last bit of concreting. You'll remember that there was some erosion. There was a Soil Conservation Service report way back from 2018 that the last council ignored that talked about the erosion of the riverbank after the low-level bridge on Tamworth Street. And so there's some erosion there on the riverbank. Some work should have been done to rectify that. It wasn't, and then some of that riverbank fell away. Because of that, we were worried about the path there. One day, people out there walking, running, riding, and that falls away and they're in the river. So we moved the path further away from the river and we made that a concrete path. It's the same with this one. This goes along a bit further from that. And if you think about the Macquarie River as it flows down, it then takes a sharp left. And that's when obviously more erosion can happen. Again, some work needs to be done on that riverbank to stop that erosion continuing. But we were worried that that would start to chew it away too far and people would be on that path and then they'd be in the river.
We've had a few examples of that in recent times, haven't we?
We have,
Wellington,
exactly
here.
right, yeah. So we're putting the concrete path in further across, further away from the river. We'll vegetate that area closer to the river, for example. And so this 510 metre replacement, 2.5 metres wide it'll be, basically will run from that area along there and down past to basically where the toilets are, along that sort of area.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't extend yet past the area where the bubbler is. That'll probably be a future project. There's another 110 metre section that'll kind of go north along the existing granite pathway, but that's probably February, maybe March next year. That'll be done. So it is about improving Trackarati, very popular area.
Is this money from council budget?
This is actually money that we got from a grant.
Okay.
And it's still public money, so you still want to be careful with public money. But I have heard some people say, what a waste of money, go and fix some potholes. You put in grant applications, and when you put in grant applications, you say, here's the project that I want to do with this grant. And so in this particular scenario, we put in a grant application for money for this particular path. We can't then take it and then say, oh, we got the money from the government, now we'll just go and stick it in some potholes over here. You've got to do an acquittal of those funds. And also, I wouldn't want to be mayor of an organisation that just took money with one story and then just change where it went. You want it to be used where you said it should be used. That would be honest and ethical to do that. So, yes, we got the money for this and we'll be using the money for that same project. And that seems like the
Makes sense.
Right, fair and reasonable thing to do. So that'll take a little bit of time. That'll take probably, I'd say, about a week or so. As you said, you've already seen the work there started. You'll probably see it being boxed up and some of the steel reinforcement being put in there, and then concrete's being poured. I think they've probably even started pouring the concrete by the time people.
They have. It's very much looking like a concrete path right now. It's coming together really well. And it actually was interesting because when I was walking around, I'd heard about the fact that concrete pathing was sort of coming in. I was actually expecting it to be sort of where the current path is. And as soon as I was walking up and I saw it sort of a little bit off to the left of the concrete path, I bet you this has got to be for erosion reasons.
Oh, there you go.
You could almost pick it, like the Forrest Gump. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm not a smart man, but I'm a man who obviously worked it out pretty quickly, the fact that was going to be the case. It looks effective.
Using common sense and logic, where will that ever get you?
Oh, I don't know. One day somewhere, who knows? Now, just in regards to concreting, I know there's been a little bit of discussion in the media recently with our new whiz-bang toilets down there, where the concrete toilets have been put in there on the area next to the river over on West Dubbo side there. Now, it appears as though there's been a couple of cracks that have formed in our new whiz-bang setup. Is this a problem?
So you're talking about the 3D printed toilets?
The 3D printed toilets.
In
that's
Lions
exactly.
Park West.
They're the whiz-bang ones.
Yeah, that's right, the whiz-bang ones.
They're the whiz-bang ones.
I like the terminology. So a few things with that. There are some hairline cracks in that, and we certainly, some of our staff, some builders over there were doing some photos around that particular project, and we were looking at, there was a couple of us there as councillors and looking at, and there were some hairline cracks, and the staff that were there said that it's pretty hard in our environment that has changes in weather to get concrete that doesn't get some sort of cracks in it. In paths, when you lay paths, you put cracks in them. You put lines, when you notice any path, you'll see the actual deliberate cracks, and cracks probably not the right word, that's probably a more technical term, but you'll see those lines they put in there to basically almost form that particular crack or give somewhere for that crack to go. When you've got this concrete structure that's been printed in the way it has, you're always going to expect some sort of movement, some hairline cracks. And our staff said that one of the options initially was to cement render that whole toilet block, but they wanted to see how it would go with just being exposed as it was and leaving it. But also, more to the point, they wanted to see how it performed and how many cracks did form. They knew there were always going to be cracks. It's not structural deformities that are about to collapse.
Well, I was going to ask you the question, is it still sound?
Absolutely right. It's still stronger than a brick wall. And I don't want someone to go and test that with a sledgehammer, please, but that the MPA rating on that is stronger than, say, concrete on a driveway. That wall would be stronger than a brick wall. So you get these little hairline cracks, not really that big an issue. And a couple of things there. Our staff said you could render it and you wouldn't see it. And render sometimes gets cracks in it.
It does.
Anyone that's got a cement rendered house would know they've probably got some cracks in there.
That's it.
But they said you'd render it, you'd paint it, you'd never about those cracks. And if you had a few little cracks, you'd easily fill them in and just repaint it. You'd never see them. With the cracks that are there, they said they're not even big enough to worry about filling, but you could fill them and then you wouldn't really notice them. Or they said you could even paint it and the cracks are small enough that you'd fill it as you painted it so you wouldn't notice them there. We've deliberately left it bare because we want to see how it behaves and performs over a full year of extreme temperatures, because Dubbo gets pretty hot.
Yep. We're going to find out about that this week.
That's right, 40 degrees plus in the shade, and then it gets pretty cold. You get down into the negatives, not often, but a few negatives during the middle of winter. So it's a fairly big difference there, and you've got sun that hits that. And I was talking to an electrician just recently, and he talked about the fact that you've got conduit that's designed for outdoors. And he said that conduit, even though it's designed for outdoors, in the Australian sun, you put that conduit outdoors, after a number of years, it still starts to break down and get brittle, even though that conduit is rated, because you've just got such a harsh sun in the Australian outdoors, in places like Dubbo where you haven't got smog or pollution to restrict some of that sunlight coming through. So it's a harsh environment. So let's test it out and see how that goes. The other thing that I keep hearing about is this term of a pedo toilet, a pedophile toilet.
Yeah, right, okay.
And I was confused about that in the first place. I said, so what is a pedo toilet and what's a non-pedo toilet? I don't really understand the difference. Now, I've learnt a bit more about pedo toilet. And a pedo toilet is apparently one where you could climb up over the outside and look in. So if anyone sees people as they go past that toilet in Lions Park West climbing up over the outside or having a selfie stick over the outside of the toilet, then please let the authorities know.
I was going to say,
the police
just do the
know.
right thing.
That's
Absolutely,
right.
yeah.
And the other thing apparently you do is that if I'm there with a young child, then I'll stand outside while my young child goes in, but I don't know who's in the toilet. Now, I've had boys and girls. In our kids, we've got boys and girls. Yeah. And I know that if I was with not my wife there and if I had my daughters with me, then I would say to my daughters, when they were very young, obviously, come into the male toilet and go into the male toilet rather than just let them go randomly off into the female toilet, not knowing who might be in there. And my wife did the same with my son. If I wasn't there, my son would go into the female toilet. So,
wouldn't you do that with any sort of public toilet?
Well, you would think so, but then I learnt what a non-pedo toilet is.
Right.
And down in Wellington, in Cameron Park, there were new toilets built down there that are single cubicle. So, for example, you've got a toilet that opens a door, You go in, there's no openings at the top at all, and you close the door behind that. So there's only the one person in there, which is the person going to the toilet. So then as a parent, you can stand outside there knowing no one else could be in there because that person, that child has gone in there, and then there's a door that's closed. The problem with Cameron Park toilets, and many people in Wellington have complained bitterly about these toilets down there because they took a number of toilets, and I don't know how many were there before, but a number of cubicles, a number of urinals, male and female. And, for example, buses would stop there as they came through Wellington. Okay, everyone, bus stop. And, of course, that was good for the local businesses. Grab a coffee, maybe buy something while you're there. And then everyone could get off the bus, go through the toilets and then get back on. They don't stop there anymore because there's a male single cubicle, a female single cubicle and a disabled toilet. And you've got to have the MLAC system key to be able to get into the disabled. So, essentially, 2 toilets and a bus driver says, well, if we stop here, that's an hour, maybe not an hour, but maybe half an hour just to get people through the toilets. Well, we'll keep going. One of the things that we thought was great about the 3D printed toilet was $316,000. That's a similar amount to what was paid for the Cameron Park toilets, but we got multiple cubicles in the male and a urinal, multiple cubicles in the female for the same money that they got, essentially a couple down there in Cameron Park. So, I don't know that it's a valid accusation we're making. And I was actually at the airport the other day and I took notice of the toilets there. You couldn't see over the top of them, but there were multiple cubicles inside, and if you had a son or a daughter that went inside, you don't know who's in there. So does that mean Sydney Airport's going to stop closing or opening these pedo toilets, as they're called? So I just think it's an interesting scenario, but we've got lots of toilets around like that across the country, across the world. And if you're taking care of your child, then you're not just randomly sending them into places.
This is the thing, though. If we consistently let fear override common sense, this is where we have problems then in our society, and we get situations whereby scenarios of single toilets are going to be popping up everywhere, as opposed to what common sense will tell us we need more. And it's not just within the toilets, it's within so many other areas of our society where suddenly the social media activists and all those sort of carry-oners will engage the fear of society and get into our fear part of our brain, activate that, enlarge that, make it go on fire. And what we lose the common sense. And
I've never heard the term pedo toilet before. I didn't actually understand it was a term, but there are a lot of toilets out there that are like this. Now, I haven't seen any move by any government authority to shut down all those other toilets. I'm not sure why the target should be the 3D printed toilet being the pedo toilet.
I think you mentioned it was the fact I think there's possibly a part of the reason why, because it's different and because there's personal agendas and this sort of stuff some people may have in regards to it, that this is why, let's throw now the fear factor in. What's another reason why we can sort of denounce this and put it down? Well,
and I think that's a really important part. When you do innovate, when you do things that are different, people are prone to be critical for no other reason than it's a bit new, and sometimes people don't like change. But without a doubt, 3D printing, it's amazing how many different forums or different groups I'm talking to that want to know about that, because this will be a way to solve some of the housing problems that you mentioned earlier in the podcast. Without a doubt, this will be a much more common building method. Fast forward 10 years, people won't be blinking an eye at a 3D gantry being set up and printing some facility, some structure, some house. It'll just be, there's another method of construction. The same as you've got weatherboard, or you've got brick veneer, or you've got cement render, you've got 3D printer. It'll just be another method that people use, and they'll make their choices based on that.
Now, Australia Day Award nominations. We made mention briefly of this last week in regards to it, because we talked about the Dubbo Day Award recipients, and we also talked about briefly the whole idea that, of course, on the 26th of January, we give out the Australia Day Awards, and we're looking for nominations for citizens here in our wonderful community who we feel are worthy recipients to receive one of these awards. So it sounds like people can start to nominate. Matt, they jump online, go to the normal sort of process. Is that the way?
Absolutely right. Just go to our dubbo.nsw.gov.au page and you can find those nomination forms there. And I'll run through the different categories we've got. So we've got Australia Day nominations in Dubbo and Wellington. So those awards will be given out on the Australia Day event. So that'll be on the 25th of January as a twilight event.
That's right.
That's
Wellington's 25th, isn't it? Yep.
And then Dubbo as a morning event on the 26th of January. So the ones that are in common, and these have grown up from the old Wellington Shire Council and the old Dubbo City Council, these were the awards those two council areas had. So we've stuck with those same awards going forward after the amalgamation. So they're slightly different. In common, both communities have Citizen of the Year, Senior Citizen of the Year, Young Citizen of the Year, Sportsperson of the Year, and Young Sportsperson of the Year. So they're the 5, and they're probably fairly common across most Australia Day ceremonies you'd see across the nation. And then over the years, I know Dubbo, and obviously the same thing happened in Wellington, there have been suggestions for a few different ones. So I know in Dubbo, because I was involved with these ones back in Dubbo City Council, Services to Sports Award is a Dubbo-specific one, and that was brought about by the fact that so many of these sports people, or young sports people in particular, that were thanking all these different people that helped them get there, we sat back and thought, gee, it takes a lot of people behind the scenes for that person to be able to do that.
So this could be a coach, it could be an administrator, it could be the grounds person who turns up each week, it could be the person who's turned up for the last 30 years running the canteen or things like that, I suppose.
Anything that you can see has helped those sports people do what they do. And it doesn't need to be someone that's made it to the Olympics. It's just someone in the under 10s, as you said, has done it for the last 30 years. Someone that won one previously, it might have even been this year, was someone I know that was involved in little athletics while their daughter was involved, which often happens. But then years after, I think probably for 10 years after his daughter had finished little athletics, he was still there doing the same job. And for many people, they do get involved with some of those activities because their kids are involved. But I remember saying to him at one stage before he won this award, I said, you're still doing that job at little athletics. Well done, because your daughter hasn't done this for a long time. His daughter was off at uni and wasn't even in Dubbo anymore. He's still turning up on a Friday night to little athletics and helping out all those other parents there. So it's that type of thing. And then the other one is in Dubbo is the Cultural Person of the Year. And again, that was brought forward by an organisation called Dubbo Arts and suggested by Dubbo Arts. And the idea there was you've got sports person and young sports person, but we've got a lot of culture in Dubbo now. Now, sometimes the Citizen of the Year, for example, might be involved in cultural pursuits, but they thought it would be appropriate, and this is after we built the theatre, after we had the Western Plains Cultural Centre, after it was really obvious that we had a real cultural heartbeat in Dubbo, then a Cultural Person of the Year, and that's been really good as well to promote culture in the community. So they're the two extra ones in Dubbo. In Wellington, you have one called the Community Event of the Year. And then another one called the Community Service/Achievement Award.
So with the Community Event Award, just to sort of clarify that for people, does that mean that the organising committee are the people who are nominated, or is there an individual who's actually nominated for that?
It's pretty flexible. It really is whatever suits that particular event. I would typically think that it would be, this event's a great event, and so the committee would be the ones who would pick up that award, but the award goes to the event as such. So the ABC Gala Festival event is the event of the year. I think it was a way, and maybe someone in Wellington can correct me on this one, but I think it was a way to celebrate some of the great things that were happening in Wellington. I'm sure someone sat back and went, gee, we've got some good stuff happening in Wellington. There's lots of different events. There's the Wellington Boot, for example. There's the Vintage Fair, and there's all these different things. People said, maybe we should recognise the best event of the year. So I'm sure it was born of something like that. Someone in Wellington could correct me and tell me exactly how it came about. But again, it's a way to celebrate that things are happening. And then the Community Service Achievement Award is probably something where it really is someone just doing something in the community a little bit different, some sort of community services. So again, those can be interpreted. There are guidelines certainly in those nomination forms, but they can be interpreted a little bit differently depending on what you feel.
One of the things I always sort of find with people who are very generous with their time is that they're most very, very humble people, and sort of they just go about their job. This is what I do. This is how I go about contributing to the community. And for these people, quite often, they feel as though, oh, look, I really haven't done enough that's really worthy of receiving an honour like this. What's your advice to these people and to the people who know these people?
I don't know anyone that started volunteering or doing some good in the community saying, you know what, I'm going to join a Rotary Club and I'm going to volunteer for my local soccer club and I'm going to do this because I want to get an Australia Day award one day. I think people do it because it's the right thing to do, because they are helping someone else out, a whole range of reasons, and they're not expecting an award, but it's still nice to pat them on the back. And so if you know someone in your life, might be family, might be friends, might be someone you just see in the community doing some great work, It's not a complicated process to nominate them.
Yep.
We want a few details on what they've done, obviously, because it's a judging process, and I have the honour of sitting on that committee, and it's a really exciting process to go through and read all these great things that people are doing. But just put the nomination in, and I suppose you never know. You mightn't think the person you know is doing lots. You might see them working away there, but when we sit down and judge and start to think about the things these people are doing, you go, wow, these people are really making a contribution.
Yeah,
or the sports person one, some people might think, oh, look, this person goes okay in this sport and they've made it to some state representation, for example, and they're doing this. And when you sit back and actually start writing it down, sometimes you go, wow, that's pretty impressive what they've done.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
yeah, I suppose people aren't thinking about these sort of things, but we ask them at least once a year to have a think about it. And so nominations close at 9 a.m. on Tuesday, the 9th of January. So you've got all over Christmas. Yep. That's right. And I thought that was a good time. We have in the past closed the nominations before Christmas, but we wanted to keep them going past Christmas, which gets a bit tight in timing because once the actual judging occurs, then we've got to get the certificates framed and everything done there. So it's a fairly tight time frame from there. But one of the things that I thought would be good was over Christmas, family and friends gather, they chat about different things and maybe, actually, you know what, I've been thinking about nominating Billy. Yeah. Oh, okay, well, let's have a talk about Billy. And then you need to get someone to actually do the paperwork and fill it in. So I thought that might be a good time over Christmas to get someone nominated.
That's a great idea.
So looking forward to reading those nominations.
It'll be fantastic. Now, Matt, every week you go and do something there a little bit exceptional from the point of view of your travels. You've got obviously heading off to Japan, or you'll be in Japan when people start hearing this. But during the week you went down to Sydney, you went to Parliament House, and you had a few important meetings, as you tend to do. The first one I'd like to talk about is with the Honourable Penny Sharpe. Now, Penny Sharpe is, just for all the listeners out there, she's the Minister for Climate Change, the Minister for Energy, the Minister for the Environment, and the Minister for Heritage. Like a lot of the ministers, they seem to have a few titles. But I'm thinking with this one right now, particularly with the renewable energy zone really being a big part of our future here, this minister's an important one to be meeting regularly with. So how did the discussion go? Really good.
And I think three of those in particular all tie in together. The Minister for Climate Change, Energy and Environment, those three to me tie in very nicely together. If you're trying to work out solutions for energy, then you're probably working out solutions that don't involve burning coal, and that means you're probably looking at climate change, and maybe that's going to be good for the environment.
Yes.
So that makes sense. Some of the ministers that we've talked about before.
It's like that old ad, this goes with this, goes with this, goes with this.
Just don't say the brand name. But you're right, those seem to make sense together. And some ministers are loaded up with lots of portfolios. These ones, though, do make sense for that one person. So Penny was in Dubbo several weeks ago, and she was at a meeting that I was at, and she just grabbed me afterwards and said, next time I'm in Sydney, just come and have a chat to me. I'd like to just get a bit of an update on what's happening. There wasn't time at that particular meeting to do that. So fantastic. I was in Sydney for another meeting, so we contacted Penny's office and Penny arranged a meeting. So we sat down and just talked about a few things. And I suppose the main thing I wanted to talk about was the fact that she'd made an announcement back in October where she said there's $128 million that's been allocated to the Central West Orana Renewable Energy Zone as a forward payment on all the riches that you will receive as time goes on. Now, keep in mind, there are proponents that will be paying community benefits funds to the three councils in our
so that's a separate payment thing again.
That's a separate payment thing. There's Energy Co, who are building the transmission lines.
Right.
They'll have a little bit of money. They'll be taking a small percentage of all the money that's paid by the transmitters or the people that are producing power. They'll clip the ticket is the term that's often called, but basically there's a small percentage will be paid to them, and we'll get a small percentage of that of those three councils. But what Penny said in that announcement, and I'm paraphrasing it here, was that that's happening in the future, but some of these communities need to see some of that change now, see some of the benefits for the renewable energy zone right now, which made a lot of sense. So the announcement
was $128 million that state government is going to be giving to 3 to 4 council groups.
Three councils?
Three councils over the next 4 years.
That's right. Now, again, when you say giving, the way it was described was a forward payment. So in other words, if we didn't get this money, we would always get it down the line when Energy Co started having power on its transmission lines, and therefore there'd be a percentage that was paid by the various producers of power, and then we'd get a small percentage of that. But this was a forward payment. Now, if you break that down, you say 128 million over 4 years. That's about 32 million over each year, if you like. So you say, okay, if I do the maths here, 32 million, and there are 3 council areas, so a bit over $10.6 million, say, for example, per year for each council over the next 4 years. Well, gee, we could use that. So that was really when Penny said, what can I do for you? I said, okay.
Are there any strings attached to this, or is this just simply like a government grant? For $10 million, you can put and spend however you want?
There will be guidelines.
Right.
We'll have to put some applications in. And I don't know the exact amount yet. My math says it's going to be about 10.6 million in the next year. And that's what I said to Penny. I said, you've made the announcement. When can we get a hand on some of this money?
Yeah, that's right.
And that's some of the advantages of having these meetings with various ministers.
Yeah.
How can we do this? And what's it look like and when and what are the guidelines, etc. So the guidelines will come out probably the beginning of January. There'll be what you're really trying to do is make an impact on the local government area for a large number of people. So an economic impact, for example, it's not about saying we've got $10 million, let's go and give it to some clubs for some new footy shirts or some soccer boots or whatever.
Major project ideas.
Major projects.
Things like maybe the Wiradjuri Cultural Centre and things like that possibly.
Things like that, things that are going to make a difference in our economy. And most importantly, this is the crucial thing that we've got to be careful of at council, is things that wouldn't be funded elsewhere. So the Wiradjuri Cultural Tourism Centre sounds like a great idea, but
there's other funding availability.
That's right. We've got other funding applications in for that. For example, roads. Sure, we could spend $10 million on the roads in a heartbeat, but is that the real economic drive we want? And are those roads going to be funded by other areas of government or our normal rates income that we've got there?
But I'm sure for $10 million we can get creative.
Exactly right. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to get creative to make something happen that's going to change the economy. I keep talking about the economy of Wellington in particular will be transformed by this res. Our job, if we're successful, we'll look back in 10, 15 years' time and say, Wellington is dramatically different. We did a great job with the riches that we had from that renewable energy zone. And you see around the world, different places have riches, and oil, I think, is probably one of them. You look at somewhere like Abu Dhabi, you maybe look at somewhere like a Dubai, and they took money they had that they knew they weren't going to have forever, and they transformed their entire economy. We've got to do that, maybe not to the extent of Dubai, but
that'd be nice.
We've got to do that with Wellington.
Build a new giant Burj Khalifa or something in there, you know.
Something like that. That'd
see it from miles away.
That'd be a tourist attraction, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
One of the things that we don't want to do is look back in 10 or 15 years' time and say, what have we changed? What's different now in Wellington as a result of these billions? And I'm talking anywhere from $10 to $20 billion of investment will occur around the renewable energy zone we've got here. If it's no different, we failed. If we can make a difference and transform that economy, we've been successful. So,
see, I can understand your passion. And this is the thing, is that you've been very, very passionate about this from the start. And I know there's been cynics out there in regards to the level of passion that yourself and others provide. But it's one of those things. This is the way the future's moving. You know, you're not going to stop this. It's already set out in place. You're talking billions of dollars of investment. They're not going to suddenly build all of this and suddenly go, well, I'll tell you what, let's go back to coal. You know, let's go back to set up some more gas lines. Let's go back to doing this. No, guys, that's not the way this is moving forward. We have to move forward from this. Plus, as you're saying here, the financial benefits are there. The options are there. With the state governments now giving out money, they're potentially $10 million a year over the next 3 to 4 years. You've got your own company groups that are going to be giving out community grant money. You've got Energy Co going to be giving out money. Plus, of course, you've got the infrastructure that's going to be set into place. Plus, you've got the people moving into the areas. This is our future, and it's a very, very exciting time. So I fully get your passion because this is exciting.
It is, and I often joke with people when they say, right, how do we stop these wind turbines being put up? And I joke, and I make it a much longer story than I'll tell now, but I say, look, go down to Bondi Beach and just stand there and build a little sandcastle on the foreshore on the beach there and maybe put your hand up and just tell the tides to stop coming in. And once you do that, then come back and stop the renewable energy zone going forward, because I think it's probably about as hard, although stopping the moon rotating around the earth might be a bit harder than stopping a res, but I go to that level because...
It's that sort of analogy though, isn't it?
It's happening, it's going forward. You're not stopping the moon spinning around to move the tides, you're not stopping these reses going forward, we're not stopping the fact that coal is going to be a yesteryear way of producing electricity. Yeah. So it's happening, and you can do two things. You can bury your head in the sand and complain and say, this is terrible, please stop it, or embrace it. If you think it's not going to be stopped, then how do we take advantage of it? And that's really the attitude that I'm taking. But Penny was also good. She wanted to know what we're doing about some of the ways we might house people, because we've got a housing problem now.
Yes.
We've got all these people that want to move from around the world to be in Dubbo.
Yep.
We've got a report that went to council that says that we will need approximately 6,000 people over the next 5 years, maybe a bit longer, where we need to have all these projects and some other projects that are happening as well, not just res projects, but some other projects.
Yeah.
So where are we going to house those people, apart from the normal people that want to live here as well? So Penny was interested in some of the solutions we're putting forward there, and I'll talk more about some of those. I don't want to make this podcast too long today because there's some really detailed solutions in there, but some exciting things happening around that sort of housing solution as well. So it was a good conversation. Always good to have conversations with ministers, always good to be invited to come along and give updates, and also a good chance to find out.
It's part of the reason why you're going down there regularly. You know, to see these ministers, to have these conversations, to meet these people, so that the benefits are huge.
You want to be in the house. You don't want to be on the outer.
Right. Yeah,
Definitely right.
Now, whilst down in Sydney, you also caught up with the Honourable Jenny Aitchison, which is she's the Minister for Regional Transport and Roads. We talk a lot about roads, and particularly after the floods, roads, and more roads was the conversation. So how's the road talk this time with Jenny?
Well, it's one of those rare occasions that I got to say thank you to the Minister.
Oh, right.
And so this meeting was part of our Regional Cities New South Wales group that we've got. 15 councillors are in that. I chair that particular group. And so we do have meetings in Sydney where we get the 15 councils together, the mayors and the GMs of those councils, but we also typically try and line up a few meetings beforehand with some various members of Parliament. So we line one up with Jenny, and Jenny's a good friend to Dubbo. She's been to Dubbo several times for different projects, different ideas and different things she's been talking about, and I've met with Jenny a few times. In fact, the very first meeting that two of these people we met with during the week, Jenny and Ron, which we'll talk about in a moment, the very first meeting both of those had when they became a minister was sitting there with Regional Cities New South Wales in a small group. I think there were probably three of us in that meeting, and both of them were a bit excited because, this is our very first meeting today. we're a minister, we've got an office here
very
now.
Cool, yes.
So Jenny is great, but it was one of those rare opportunities to actually say thank you, Jenny. In the budget, there was an additional $334 million that was allocated in the budget for regional roads. Now, that's been on top of the previous funds that have been announced, the $390 million that was previously announced. Now, we did say thank you for that, and she did say, well, that $334 million is not just for Dubbo. You realise that? I was hoping it might be, and not just
Merry
for regional
Christmas,
cities.
Santa Claus, there it is.
That's right. It was for regional roads in general, but that's still good. And we're spending the money that we've been getting.
A little bit extra helps.
Oh, absolutely right. And we're spending that money that's going through. People are seeing roads improve. They're not perfect yet, but it takes time. Keeping in mind how much water we had through our landscape, through our roads, everywhere at the end of last year. It's not even a year since that water started to recede. So I think we're going okay. It starts to get much more expensive to do it much faster because you're paying either a lot of overtime or bringing in contractors that are getting very competitive for their services, so they're putting their prices up. But a good conversation with Jenny. And one of the things that was good, and this is where just that power of meeting, it wasn't an issue in Dubbo, but two of the councils that sat around the table there with the Regional Cities group said to Jenny that they had a bit of a problem where they'd been given approval for some certain funding for a project. They'd signed the deed, everything was happening. They were doing the work, but the payments weren't coming in from the government.
Oh.
So not a great situation for a council to be. Now, the council's not about to go broke.
Yep.
They've got enough cash in the bank they can keep funding it, but they said, we can't keep doing this particular project if no money's flowing in from it.
It's very strange, though. Like normally,
it is.
State government's pretty good at that, aren't they?
They are pretty good at paying, and I think from Jenny's perspective, it's just there is so much happening at the moment. It's so busy, and it's a new government. So you've got new staff in some situations that are coming in. So getting everyone up to speed and keeping up to all the things that are happening, in particular with roads, I think was a challenge. But anyway, that was great. Jenny scribbled it down, took it on board, and I'm sure she was going off to talk to some staff after that meeting to say, can you just get these councils paid? Yeah, that's right. It's not a good look. But again, a lot of value in meeting with Jenny, and I think Jenny is very genuine. She's got a good background in local business, so she's been involved in local business in Maitland, and she gets some of those things like cash flow from a local business perspective. That starts to hurt, so she understands some of those things. So, yeah, good to see Jenny involved there and great to be meeting with her.
Good on her. Now, the final person I want you to give me a bit of an update on and how the meeting went was with Ron Honig. Minister for Local Government. So you had a chance to meet with Ron as well. So how'd that go?
Yeah, and again, as I mentioned before, Ron, when he became minister, we were the first ones to meet with Ron as well. So he remembers us fondly in terms of the Regional Cities Group. What was really good about this is that Ron has got incredible experience as a mayor. He spent a long time as a mayor in Sydney.
Right.
Incredible experience in local government.
Yep.
And he's a minister for local government. So that makes sense, someone with that background and experience. But Ron sat down in the meeting and he said, okay, tell me about regional areas. I've got lots of experience and knowledge around Sydney councils and how things operate there. I want to know more about regional councils. We went, fantastic. Let's talk to you about some of those differences. And it doesn't take very long to point out some differences. So, for example, in Sydney, you don't have to worry about water because you've got Sydney Water. You don't have to worry about sewage because Sydney Water take care of that as well. So just to say, Ron, we've got roads, rates and rubbish, but we've got water. We're producing water. Now, that's a pretty important job to do because we don't want to make the LGA sick. If we don't get it right at the water treatment facility, we potentially have
our portfolio is much larger than most of the portfolios in Sydney councils.
Absolutely, bigger than all of them. So we talked about the fact that we own water treatment, we own sewage treatment, we own things like airports, we own sale yards, we own childcare, we own caravan parks. There are some councils that own health clinics, so they might employ some nurses and then bring doctors in on a locum basis. Some councils own hairdressing studios because that was important to their council.
One thing we don't own, Ron, is paid car parking to the great extent.
We don't, that's right. So Ron was all ears and he was very interested in some of these differences there, even just the rating structure, farmland rating. Ron didn't do any farmland rating in a Sydney council for some strange reason.
I can't work that out.
That's right. So I actually think that was a really positive meeting with Ron because he needs to just make sure that when he's making decisions around local government, it's not just his experience, and he has got a huge amount of experience, but not just his experience in that Sydney environment. It's really the experience of 128 councils that needs to be taken into account. So I think it was a very productive meeting. Just briefly after that one as well, it's great to meet with ministers, but we also met with Joe McGurr, who's the member for Wagga, independent member for Wagga, and also met with Helen Dalton, who's the independent member for Murray. And even though they're not in government, they're not ministers, independents at the moment because it is such a tight parliament that you've got in terms of the numbers with Labor and the coalition, those independents play a very important role. But it's also good because both Joe and Helen are from regional areas. Helen in particular comes from a farm. So when you talk about regional issues, when you talk about things that are important regionally, they get it. And so we want them as well as advocates for regional areas in talking to the Ron Honigs of the world to make sure that they fully understand it as well. And it's one of their colleagues.
Reinforce the message almost.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So, no, good meetings. That took up most of Wednesday. I think we got there about Wednesday lunchtime. Took up most of Wednesday afternoon in terms of just having those meetings and having those good discussions.
Now, on Thursday, you managed to catch up with the Regional Council New South Wales group, and you had a couple of presentations from a few different groups here. In particular, let's start off with the first one with the New South Wales ports.
Well, I'll run through the four different groups I met with. So this was Regional Cities New South Wales, and again, this is the group of 15 councils that we've got, and they're all cities. They're up the coast, down the coast, up as far as Tweed, down as far as Albury, inland, Dubbo, Tamworth, Orange.
Because you meet with these guys fairly regularly, don't you?
Quarterly is the normal process. Sometimes we'll do extra things, but typically quarterly. You share ideas, you share common problems, you share common solutions. Really important. Even the e-planning portal, which is not proving to be fantastic from the government. One of the discussions on the day was, how many extra staff are you putting on at your council? So one of the mayors said, we've got one extra staff member just to do the e-planning portal. So a perfect example of cost shifting. And then around the room, the different councils talked about anywhere from 1 to 2 staff, depending on how many DAs they might be processing. So sometimes you might think, why are we taking so much time with this? We've got one staff member just doing this. But then when you talk to 15 other councils, you think, well, it's not just me. There's obviously a problem there. So 4 different groups we had come and do presentations to us. Sometimes we'll get some members of parliament come along on the day, but we met with so many the day before. We focused on some different meetings. We met with New South Wales Ports. So that's the organisation that has the 99-year lease for Botany, Port Botany and Port Kembla, just to get a bit of an idea from that and lots of information there. But the one thing that really captured my mind out of that was that for every 10 containers that come in to Port Botany that come in full of goods, 4 containers go out full of goods.
Yeah, right.
So we've got a
That's
huge
that basic
discrepancy.
exports versus imports discussion,
It is, isn't it?
Right
That's
there.
right. Now,
Yeah.
we do bulk exports as well. We do bulk exports of grain or different ore, coal, that type of thing. But in terms of containers, that's a problem. And if we get more exports going out, say, manufactured goods, that would actually make transport cheaper for us, because when those ships bring in full containers, when they take away empty containers, it's still taking up room on their ships. They've got to get those empty containers back somewhere else to be filled up again. But if someone was paying for that going out, paying for that freight to go out, that'd obviously reduce the cost of freight overall. So lots of interesting things there, but that was fascinating. We also met with Realm. Now, Realm is doing a project for us, for regional cities in New South Wales.
Right.
We got $400,000 from the state government in the previous government to do what we call a pinch point program. And what that is about looking at different areas across the state, not just one local government area. And there's no way we'd be able to get this sort of project going as 15 individual councils. But as a collective, we took the idea to the state government and we said, we know there are freight pinch points across the state. They go across multiple LGAs, or sometimes they might be in between our city LGAs in some smaller council areas.
Yep.
We want to investigate those and find where those pinch points are so we can present you with a
these
program.
These like congestion points of traffic, are they?
Points, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
And so they're impacting freight across the state. So far, and it was an update from our contractors called Realm, RHELM, and it was an update from them. And so far they've identified 102 pinch points across the state.
Yeah, right, okay.
And they'll continue on that now and basically put together a business case for each of those 102 pinch points and the approximate cost to actually repair or fix or alter those.
Would that then go back to state government to say, hey guys,
we'll then have a
these
document.
Are the problems?
Yeah, we'll have a document. And I've already talked to Jenny about it. We'll have a document. We'll take to state government and say, here are the 102 pinch points.
So you must
Here's
become
a
like a consultancy group for the state government.
Well, we
employ a
actually
consultancy group for your group. They need to become the consultancy group for them.
We did say that we're probably doing some of the work of the state government of Transport for New South Wales. Having said that, they're paying for it, so I'm okay with that.
But it gives you significance and importance as a group then too for the state government.
Well, the state government then would want to talk to us more about
Absolutely.
those. And we're rating those in low, medium and high priority areas. And so we'll be able to say to them, here are the high priority areas. Some of those might be expensive, but some of those involve things like ring road around some particular cities, for example, to basically remove some of the congestion that might occur that adds to the congestion in that city for other areas as well as congestion on through traffic. So that's a good project, good update. We also met with the Department of Planning.
Right.
Now, the Department of Planning, we've had issues with regional cities for a long time because they continually under forecast our population growth.
When we actually spoke about this, haven't we, in regards to that? Yes.
When we then see the census data come out, we say, well, they got it wrong, and that's had an impact on this city, because when a state government sits down to look at planning, they say, right, we need so many teachers and so many nurses and so many police in that area. Now, over the next 10 years, we're going to grow by that much in that city, so here's what we estimate we need. If I'm a business looking to expand my business, I might look at different cities or different states that I might move my business to or open a new branch in. And I know many years ago when Masters, remember the hardware store that started up in opposition to Bunnings? It didn't end up going that well. They either closed it down or they just stopped expanding.
Yes.
And I remember talking to Masters about opening up in Dubbo, because they were looking to open up in Dubbo, and they had a whole range of data points they were looking at to see whether or not they should open up. And certainly the projection of growth was one of those data points. So businesses do definitely look at that data. So we had the Department of Planning sitting in the room, and we had lots of stories from different councils, including Dubbo, across the room. We actually hired Bernard Salt, the demographer, many years ago, back in the Dubbo City Council days, and got him to do a report, or the organisation he was working for, to do a report to say what the population growth would be based on a range of factors that we were aware of in Dubbo, and it was way over what the forecast growth was from the Department of Planning. And looking back now, Bernard was much closer
to the truth than what the other ones were.
Than the Department of Planning. So what was good is we've got a new department there, new staff at the senior levels there.
Are they open to listen to this type of discussion?
And that was really comforting. They didn't defend it and say, no, this is right, this is how we do it. They talked about the methodology, but they also talked about the fact that there are other factors that may need to be taken into account. So they're open to the information coming from those councils to put the information forward to convince them that the growth is going to be different. So that was fantastic. We didn't really have time to talk much about the e-planning portal. It was just hey, this is broken, fix it. It didn't go into a lot of detail. It was mainly about that population forecasting. So that's
important. It's a big one.
It is. It's a big one. And the last one we met with was Landcom. Now,
It's the development group.
Yeah, so it's a state-owned corporation, what's called a SOC, SOC, state-owned corporation, and they basically go out and do development. Now, typically they've done development in Sydney to try and get lots of land and lots of buildings going for people to be able to live in, probably Western Sydney they're focused on. This government has said, go regional, go west, young man, go west.
Yeah, right.
So they've said, let's go out and talk to regional areas. I think the best area for Landcom to focus on is with Crown land and unlocking some Crown land that's not being used in any other way.
Sounds good.
And because it's Crown land owned by the government, you've got Landcom owned by the government, you can work with the local council and try and develop some of those areas. We've actually had a discussion with them around some Crown land in Wellington, for example, because we know we're going to need a lot of growth in Wellington.
Yeah.
So we had
with
some
the rest
discussions.
and everything else.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's right. We had some discussions before this particular meeting with Landcom and said there's some Crown land there. That'd be nice for you to look at. They typically only do things on a fairly large scale. That's the way they've been used to working. And so we looked at that. Unfortunately, at this stage, we don't know where it's going to go, but after those discussions started, very shortly afterwards, there was a land claim activated on that Crown land by the Lands Council.
Disappointing.
So, well, we've got to see what happens with that. Maybe they've got some great use they want to have for that
Let's hope
particular
so.
land. Maybe they can help develop some affordable housing for Aboriginal tenants potentially. But let's see where that goes. But again, Landcom and Crown Lands have got some expertise in dealing with these. So let's see how they go. But it was really just a presentation by Landcom to say, we're here. This is our model. This is how we operate. If you need any help or any councils need us to go and help you out with any projects, come and talk to us. So it was really just, again, that relationship building, but also hearing about some of the other projects they've got going on around the state just to see if that might fit in with our area.
Good.
So, again, something that was good to hear across that broader collective. So a good meeting on Thursday, tied up most of Thursday going through those discussions.
Well, mate, it's getting to that time, end of the podcast, and moving towards the Limerick of the week. So what have you got for us this week?
I couldn't help go past the citizenship. I've probably done a limerick on citizenship before, but
You probably have, but I always enjoy your citizenship one.
I do like the fact that we've got all these people moving to Dubbo.
Yes.
So this week it's all about people coming to Dubbo. From the north, the south, east and west, Dubbo's their choice. It's the very best. With cultures so rich, life's a wonderful stitch in this city we're all joyously blessed.
Oh, I love it. I love the actions too that you put into that one as well. Like, listeners can't see it, but I can. All right, folks. Well, look, Matt, have a wonderful trip over there to Japan and have a safe trip, and I'm looking forward to hearing all about it next week as well. Okay, folks, that's it for this week. Until next week, take care.
Straight from the Mayor's Mouth with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.